Hi guys. We are going to try a couple different things. So we are actually going to combine our two classes. Um, so our type class and our image making class, and we are going to work on the Trump layout. So, like any other design project, I start a project like this by sort of putting down ideas. Sometimes I'll put down layout ideas. Sometimes I'll put down illustration ideas, but it doesn't matter. You can do those two things separately because I find with illustration layouts, I need to do them a little bit bigger. And then I need to sort of work backwards. So I've worked on this really bad comp, um, but it's basically a picture of Trump's head, and there's a series of there's traffic going across through his hair, and there's all these factories and everything, and they're blowing out this huge smokestack. And within that, I would try and keep my story. So one of the things that I want you to focus in on today is working on two things at the same time. So the first thing you want to do is basically work out an idea for the illustration of the story. And we're going to do that in this class, but we're also going to work out our type layout. So you can do the two things separate. You can do thumbnails for the actual illustration, and then, or you can do it like I do, where I will actually sort of erase back and try things. So that's what you're looking at here. So really, the idea behind this project is that we are going to try a symmetrical layout, meaning like our headline, our intro, our body copy is all completely balanced. Then when you do that, you can try offsetting a few things. So on my second layout here, what I've done in a very scribbly way is I've done the same thing. So here's Trump, and there's a bunch of smoke, and the smoke is meant to go in front of his eyes because he can't see where he's going, type thing. And then I've done the entire story as a one simple column all the way down the page. And then just to offset the symmetry a little bit, I've put numbers kind of around his head. On the other one, I've used two icons. So I thought I would use one up here and then another one down here, and then perfectly sandwich everything in a symmetrical way. So if you don't know what you're doing with your idea, that's where you definitely want to start. So you want to start by reading the article. Remember, we want to use a monoline stroke illustration, so no fills. With this type of thing, we're trying to get across like a simple idea, and we're trying to do it all in the same weight. And with these types of things, they can be as small as you want to be. You never really want to go beneath sort of 0.4 on the stroke, but within that, it's going to be all black and white. So you can have a standalone icon, or you can have an icon that is an accent to the story. On this one that you're looking at here, it'd be more a feature, but on this one, you're looking at two simple icons. And I thought, I would try and figure out maybe doing his uncle on the bottom and him on the top, and then captioning it. So that is the first thing, is that you have to figure out what that idea is, right? But then the second part of it is just as important, and that's how the layout is going to work as far as type goes. So when I'm laying out type, I typically do it with lines. So I'll draw in my columns in a very rough way. And sometimes I'll go in tighter. If I need to do a more technical document, I might do it tighter than this, but I typically indicate typography and lines of body copy with lines across the page. So I draw these columns, I draw the intro, and then you can see on the other one, I've sort of done the same thing. This doesn't have to be 3 columns, so you can sort of see in this one, I've done an option that would just be 1 column. Everything sort of set in one long column, and then offsetting a few numbers. So yeah, that's typically how I will do a thumbnail for a layout itself, so that I understand, yes, this is relatively how it's going to look. I'm going to have the numbers down at the bottom. It's going to be two icons, an intro, headline, and again, you know, obviously things like white space. I might make a few notes over on the side for myself. So that's relatively where I start. So we are going to start by doing that. You're going to do two things at the same time. You're going to try and figure out what that idea is for the icon. It doesn't have to be a big idea. I don't want you guys to uh, think that this has to be a groundbreaking illustration. It could just simply, you know, it could be a simple icon with, you know, Trump pretending to be a scientist, or, you know, it could be some of the far-fetched ideas that he's talked about in there. Read the story, figure that out, and then once you sort of have your idea down, then put it into a layout and start using things like lines and to indicate where your columns are going to go, where your type is going to go, where your big numbers are going to go, where your headline is going to go. And so we are going to do that for the first hour of the class, and then I'm going to check in on your ideas, and once I check in on your ideas, I'm going to release you to start doing the typesetting. So the idea is that we are going to do two different versions of this. So one can be serif, one can be sans serif, and you're going to set it up for your icon that you're going to work on Friday, or you can also work on it at home and have it ready to go. But the idea that we will workshop it on Friday, and I will work with each one of you to sort of tighten things up. So a few things to remember. Hierarchy. Headline should be sort of, you know, number one, intro number two, body copy should be four, and things like numbers should, they kind of are their own thing. But remember, when you're doing numbers, not to pull out the entire thing, because it never looks good to go, you know, do a huge 40 and then a whole paragraph of the same size. So I tend to make the secondary infographic type close to the body copy type. And remember, I want you guys to really be thinking about print, right? So when I'm working on something like this, I am going to start by relatively looking at my, in InDesign, looking at my margins and columns. So I'm going to go layout, margins and columns. And the first thing I'm going to do is set something a little bit more realistic. So typically on a layout like this, I'm giving the top more space. So I might start with 2 inches. I'll bring up the bottom. Maybe I won't go so high on the top. I'm going to make that like 1.5 inches, just as a starting point, because I tend to always change these as I go. So I'm going to bring up, you know, 0.75. And then the inside and the outside margins are really the ones that you guys have to be aware of. That's where you're going to gain most of your white space. So with this one, we're doing a symmetrical layout. So that basically means that your inside and your outside margins here and here should be the same. So there I've sort of set up 3 columns. I could set up 2 columns. I could set up 1 column. However, if I set up 1 column, that column is going to be less wide than that, because we want to try and keep line lengths at a certain length. We don't want 20 words on a line. So I'll start with that, and then I will actually go in, and if I sort of know what my illustration is going to look like, a lot of times I'll actually go in and I'll just sort of gray in a box, and this helps, you know, give it a nice light tint so it's not too overwhelming, because I do know it's an icon, and an icon is not a huge gray box, obviously. So then I'm going to sort of take my columns. First thing I'm going to do is check what point size it is. So I check it, and remember that with a print layout, we are typically looking anywhere from 8 to 9.5 point size. So I'm going to change that. So I'm going to go, let's just say 9.5 over 12, and then I can see what that gets me. So the first thing I'll actually start with is just sort of roughing in where my columns are going to go. And in this case, I'm actually going to work with columns that it's one text box, but it has columns built into it. So this is one of the great things about InDesign is if I take my text box and I drag it out, so I'll grab it just like in Illustrator, and it won't distort the text like it does in Illustrator. I'll grab it out, pull it, and then up here, if you see where I'm clicking, you can see it says 2 columns. See the lines here for columns, 1 column, and in this case, I'm going to go 3 columns. So what that basically does, it means that all your columns are going to are all going to line up. Sorry. So that's great because you don't have to worry about adjusting the, the tops and the bottoms and everything else. So I can just basically take this. I'm going to find out where is like a nice spot to sort of have the story end. So I might adjust it, making sure that we don't have any orphans or widows. And then I am just sort of setting it in a spot. The next thing I'm gonna look at is my intro paragraph. I'm gonna select that. And in this case, I'm going to change this. If I'm doing, so I'm doing my sans serif. So I change this to sans serif. And then I'm going to bump this up a little bit. So I'd like to run it across 3 columns, but in this case, I'm actually going, because it's symmetrical, I'm actually going to make it set left, but I'm gonna balance it in the middle so it's actually centered, and I will actually measure that out. And then after that, I will sort of tackle my number. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna read what each one of those things says. So pollution from coal is linked to 4 of the 5 leading causes of death. So a lot of times what I'll actually do is I will come in and I will make an actual text box just for the number. So I might go 4, so I could do that 4 of 5. So I might go 4 of 5, but I might make, in this case, to make it a little bit more interesting, I might make the numbers really large. So that basically gives me something a little bit more interesting to work with. And so I'll sort of start moving around the page and just seeing what I have, right? So I've got lots of room for my story here. Got lots of room for my headline and illustration. So I'll start, get everything sort of in place, and then I will do my 2 layouts, so serif and sans serif, get it ready to go, keep a space open where I think the illustration is going to go, and I'll get this completely ready to go for our next class, which is the image making class, and that's where we'll finish this. So for today, by the end of the class, you should have 2 layouts. One will be serif, one will be sans serif. Should be completely balanced out. There should be everything should be nice and clean and tight. You should have margins and columns all built in. You want to make sure that there are no, make sure you have no widows or orphans on there. Everything is hunky-dory. You can do things like drop caps if you want. But for today, what we're aiming for are 2 layouts.